Welcome back to Are You Being Real? I got one of my best friends in the house today, the one and only, the big dog, the big G, David Denberg.
Thanks so much for having me here today, Mark. Couldn't be more excited. We actually get to hang out in a professional sense, and I get to see what you do up close and personal.
I'm very excited about it. I remember our first conversation. It was a phone conversation, and you were like, oh, you have a podcast about authenticity. Huh. I immediately felt judged, but it was the start of an amazing friendship, and we've shared so many incredible times together, and I'm just thrilled to have you here. So I could sit here and acknowledge you all episode long, and I probably will do that, but I want to drop into it. So for everybody tuning in, David is just an exceptional community builder and relationship manager, truly top notch. He is the co-founder of Open Circles, and he is also the executive producer of blockchain Unbound. So David, I want to drop right into a story. I know community is incredibly important to you. It's in your DNA, community building, throwing epic events. So I'm curious to know how you found that. I imagine there's probably a good story there where maybe you were at a crossroads in your life and you found an inner calling.
So one of the stories that is my proudest reminder of grit, of curiosity, and really vision. I was seeking in a moment in my life. I graduated from college. I was 23. I'd gone on a trip to South America for 9 months. I'd come back and I was like, what do? I want to be an entrepreneur. And I had a friend who was like, hey, my mom has a storefront on Abercrombie. And so I did this clothing store. This clothing store was a men's streetwear pop-up. It kind of led to the next thing, which is one of the themes in life that I've always found is everything is really the stepping stone to the next thing. And so the store, while doing that, I met a gentleman named Elliot Bisnow. And I was asking myself, I've always been a little bit different. I've always been the person who organizes and mobilizes his friends. My mom, if you were to ask her, she'd say, I threw too many parties at the house. And Elliot tells me he's got a group of friends living in a house in Miami, and they're building something called the Summit Series community. And I was so intrigued, and so I started learning about what it was, just reading, and eventually Elliot invited me to come out and live and visit and work. And I got there, and it was this beautiful house on Star Island, 6 bedrooms on the water. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm finally going to be part of the team. And they're like, oh, there's no room for you. And I was like, oh, what do I do? So I went on Amazon and I purchased a tent. Think of it kind of like an African safari tent.
Okay, how big? Like a two-person?
No, it was 6-foot ceilings.
Oh, nice.
6-foot ceilings, okay. And maybe 10 feet wide by 15 feet long. And so then I went to IKEA and got a bed frame. And I got a rug and a dresser for my clothes. And then I went to Costco and I got orchids and power cords. And I basically set up in about 24 hours a tent that I ended up living in for almost 3 months. And at that moment in time, I was just seeking and curious about people who looked at the world with eyes of anything is possible, with eyes that community is the foundation, and I wanted to be part of something larger than myself. I was so curious. So I said, hey, I'll work for free, living in this tent, which then became the really popular, hey, check out the interns tent in Miami. And it's one of our old school stories at Summit that lived on for many years as people came to understand the genesis of the different members of the team.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. Why were you so passionate about learning about community? Is that something that you had always craved or longed for?
Community for me is also culture.
Okay.
I've always been fascinated by other cultures, and that's what drove me to live and travel. And by seeing the way that we live, the social norms, the archetypes, the individuals, the professions, was just one version. And I started seeing everything else out there and asking myself, why does it have to be a solo journey when you can get the support of your friends and be on the accelerator path to achieve everything you want?
I'm curious to ask you this question. What is community? I see the word all over the place these days in varying degrees. There could be, an organization that throws an event, once every 3 months, and then you come to the event and they talk about community. And then there's also community where it's like we're active parts of each other's daily lives. So I'm kind of just curious to know, when you think of the word community, what does it really encompass?
I think community has a lot to do with values.
Okay.
When I identify as part of a community, and so does someone else, we instantly know that we share a certain section of values and that we can trust each other. And that trust is the foundation of collaboration. And so community is not a physical place. A physical place is a way of activating a community. A community is something that lives on through every action of the people that embody those values.
Cool. I like that a lot. It reminds me, I read the book Loneliness, which is about the loneliness epidemic, but in the book, it explains and explores some science as to who we are. And what the book stated is that there's 3 elements of who we are. It's our individual identity and how we view ourselves. Mm-hmm. It's our relations to specific individuals in our lives and the roles that we play as a result of that, whether it's like brother or boss or whatever it is. And then the third piece is belonging and feeling we're a part of a bigger community. So when you said that about the shared values, that really rung true for me.
I think community is the cornerstone for all success too. It's happiness because it gives you this life force. You're like, I can do anything because I know that I have the support of the people around me.
Mm-hmm. Well said. And then there's the next challenge, which is, how the hell do you cultivate community? It's a big question.
That is a big question. And it takes time, first and foremost.
Yeah.
It also takes clarity on what the values are, right? So to cultivate community, I have a simple belief in relationships. If you make someone's life better, then they will appreciate you for that. And everyone has a different need when it comes to better. So for some people, it's help me grow my business. For some people, it's help me meet my romantic partner. Mm-hmm. For some people, it's share with me a great playlist, information, culture, music, art, entertainment, introductions, all of it. And at the core, the best friendships are not only when you have fun together, but that you then create stuff together.
Yeah. Yeah, well said. Have you heard Aristotle's 3 different categories of friendship?
No.
So Aristotle said that there's 3 different categories of friendship. There's people who are there for utility, to help you out with things that you need help with. Yeah. There's people that are there for pleasure and fun. I think like the playlist kind of fits into that category. People you enjoy spending time with. And then the third is the people that make you a better person.
And you really need all 3.
You really do.
Interesting
thing.
You
really do.
I think about my day today even, or any day, it does have that balance of all 3.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So David, I want to hear everything what you're up to, because I know you just made a big change, a big leap in your career, really going off on your own. So I'd love to have you share a little bit about that. And then I want to just get more into the types of events that you throw, because you're just a master at bringing incredible people together, as well as setting the vibe. I don't think there's a better person that I know that's setting a good vibe for whether it's a party or for an event. So let's just start with this transition that you've recently made. Tell us kind of what you were doing and what you're up to now.
Well, thank you. I feel very privileged to be a part of something like Summit for so long. And so over the past 8 years, I got to be a part of an organization that was at the center of a movement around entrepreneurship and lifestyle design.
And you worked for free the whole time living in a tent?
No. That was the first foray. Eventually, when we were living in Malibu, we all got to live in a big house together, and I brought the team back to my childhood hometown. But in terms of the genesis of my belief in Summit, the experiences, I called in the change because every single role in the company had been able to do. been able to see what it's like to be at the very bottom, living as the intern, to being the person who's driving forward ideas, creation, building teams. And I just wanted to take everything I learned, because I think it should be open source. I think it should be shared with the communities of the world. And so I started looking around, where is there a void in these really authentic, social, emotional, physical driven interactive experiences? And Asia in general, I think, is really new to the mature audience of these community driven events. So blockchain as an industry has always fascinated me. I believe it's one of those community tools that at a macro level allows people to break down the barriers and interact as small communities. So I realized I'm not a technologist. I'm not an investor. I want to bring what I know to an industry that will value it. Thoughtful, driven, and integrated cultural experiences. So that set me on the path early February this year.
That's amazing. So you're producing different types of events in blockchain, bringing other people together, smaller groups.
Yeah, so the first project was something in Puerto Rico, and it was unbelievable. We had 800 people, 4 days, 4 nights, and this is 6 months after the hurricane. Still, 50% of the island doesn't have power, and there's a lot of new legislation that's coming out. I'd been approached by Blockchain Industries, a fund here in Santa Monica and Puerto Rico, that said, hey, we'd love to work with you to produce this event. And I started building the team and realizing that if we wanted to have a good event, it couldn't come to Puerto Rico and not acknowledge what's happening. So we actually did the whole event as a not-for-profit business, and we sent 75 people on service impact missions throughout the country on Saturday on the 4th day.
Wow. Love how you give back and how you incorporate that into essentially like a business conference.
Yeah, I think this ties into the concept of community. People want to feel that if they're investing their time to be somewhere, they're not extracting value, they're adding value. And that's what it comes down to when you talk about impact, leaving a place better than when you found it.
Yeah, I feel like that's like a really full experience, and it's something that you may not do on your own. And then to be in that kind of environment with other people who are at the conference, lending a hand, that's a great way to bond as well. I know that it's sometimes challenging to meet people, so when you're kind of thrown into that kind of environment, I imagine it's like a great way to build like a beautiful, authentic relationship. So Blockchain Unbound, that's coming up in Tokyo this fall.
Exactly. So that's our next chapter of the brand.
Okay.
And the narrative is blockchain in Tokyo as a city of the future, where more than half of all Bitcoin is traded, allows us to bring this infusion of East meets West, entrepreneur, exchanges, investors, and all the while pairing sort of this Tokyo culture programming that really brings people to the sense of being in a totally foreign land.
So, David, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about this personally. You've helped me a lot in terms of setting the vibe in my house, or different hotel rooms, different types of scenarios. You are a master. One thing I really have so much respect about you about is your level of detail. That you, like when you're throwing an event or when you're gathering, even just maybe a couple friends over, maybe it's even just like 2 people come over to your place, the detail to which you provide to create an epic experience is just so apparent. So I just wanted to like pick your brain and like dissect it a little bit as to like your thought process as to how to set a vibe, and maybe some tips as to specific things that people can do to make a positive impression on their friends when they're hanging out, whether just a few friends or a larger event.
All right. Do you remember when I gave you that the pro tip on vibe for Burning Man 2 years ago?
The frankincense and myrrh, the incense?
Fred Saul's incense. Really nice, natural oil baby wipes. None of that garbage. Candles that smell that are made from soy wax. Yeah, thank you, by the way. I really appreciate that, because the details are what make everything. And it's not essential, but when you see the details, you instantly know how much someone cares. You see how much time they put into it, because to know what makes for the best lighting, to have the lighting, the dimmer switches in your house, to check the wattage on the bulbs, to see sort of the speakers and the music layout, like all those details people don't realize, but they add up. And at a certain point, you get to a space and you instantly know if you're like, this hits and I could stay forever and time disappears, or it doesn't.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, when you're throwing a party, you want to make sure that people are having a great time, that they're sticking around, not just rolling through and rolling out.
It's also the sense of discovery. So like, think of it, any event, any party, any experience is a journey, and it starts and there will always be an end. And sometimes that end comes quick and sometimes that end is a long time.
Yeah.
And I think of it like a sequence of discovery of things. And the more you're like, okay, I walk in the door. When I walk in the door, what's the ritual that sets the tone for the moment that you have arrived? You've given a journey. You can either just walk in and take a seat, or you can say, oh, welcome to my home. Take your shoes off. You are here. And that type exchange allows people to give a sense of place and also appreciate the moment that they're living more versus just brushing right by it.
It's such a subtle context setting to like ground someone in the present. That's really cool. You had a little dinner party about a month or two ago in support of Open Circles. Yes. And you added a really nice, simple touch that I really liked, where I think you brought out like a bowl and there was some like paper. Yes. And you had everyone write one piece of advice, maybe the best piece of advice they've received lately. I forget exactly how you teed it up. Yeah. But you had everyone write it down and then put it in this cup, and then we waited for a while. And then we passed around this cup, and each person like picked one piece of wisdom or advice and read it to everyone. And then they had the opportunity if they wanted to like bring it home. And it was so simple, right? Like anyone could do that. And it was a lot of fun.
You want to hear the funny part about that?
Sure.
When you get someone to write something down, they put it in there. The game is to drag it out as long as you can, because no one wants to leave. Now they want to see what everyone else wrote, and they want to see if they pick their own card and whoever picks their own card. Right. So if you have a dinner party, you actually just put it right in plain sight, and everyone's just having fun until the very moment you feel the room and you say, guys, let's read the cards. And you say, hey, this is not like a 5-minute per person thing. Pick up the card, read it, pass it on. And everyone gets to go home with a piece of advice and a souvenir of the night that they remember as something that someone else who they respect or was in a curated setting got that advice and they shared it with this group.
It's really brilliant. And it's funny because like you were one step ahead there. And I feel like you're always one step ahead. There's always like that what's next kind of idea brewing in you. And it's usually not just like for your own like pleasure, but it's usually for the pleasure of many. So my question for you is, how do you stay present and be one step ahead?
It's a simple answer.
Yeah.
I call it time travel.
Nice.
And by that I mean though, I think it's a hospitality mindset.
Yeah, okay.
We're right here, but I could go right there and imagine in 5 minutes where we're going to be, what you might need, and then come right back to the present body. Yeah. It takes a few seconds, but come back and you're like, hey, here I am, but I just saw the future.
Yeah. In regards to that, where you have a hospitality mindset, I know that we all have a tendency to give at times, and you give for the sake of giving, but I know that's also like very reciprocal. So I kind of wanted to get your kind of philosophical expert take on relationship building in that regard, in terms of like the giving and receiving, because it's a real art and it takes a real tact.
Yeah, it's a great question. I believe at the core, if you are a helpful person, the universe just provides help back. So at the macro level, there's that. On the more precise level, what I mentioned earlier about adding value, sometimes you just have to ask your friends, how can I help? What's going on? Is there anything that you really want to do? And if there's a way that through our friendship we can unclog anything or, open the cork, and it's just boom, accelerator.
David, you have so many incredible relationships. You're easily one of the most connected people I know. And it's not just the quantity of relationships you have, but it's also the quality of relationships you have. And, as someone who personally loves to keep in touch with everyone I've ever met, I have a lot of admiration for the personal touch and commitment you have to maintaining your relationships, and making people feel special is also having touch points where you're providing value for them. So I wanted to pick your brain as to some of your favorite tips and tricks to build and sustain relationships.
If you are having a meeting with someone, I used to have a little note on my phone. And that same game about asking a question, I used to do it in a meeting because I thought to myself, if I never see this person again, at least I'll have a nugget of wisdom from them that's been through their life, and I'll give them something from my life. And I built this rapid collection of incredible quotes. And then I started realizing, well, how do I follow up with people? I ask for advice, and then I come back with my thoughts and opinions on something that they recommend. For example, I say, hey, Mark, what book have you just loved lately that you would recommend?
Busting Loose from the Money Game.
Busting Loose from the Money Game. I can't wait to read it, reach out and say, hey, Mark, this is what I thought about it. And now I've got a great reason to talk to you. And you've now been empowered because you know that your suggestions are heard. And that I value your opinion. And you also see that my commitment as a friend is to read that, learn that, grow, and come back and share. It goes across the board with, cooking someone dinner, much in the same way as reading a book.
That's awesome. And so you do this consistently. How do you manage it all? I mean, you have so many friends, so that's a lot of moving pieces there.
Yeah, it's not always a book. That's just, one example.
Right.
But
Are you just super organized? Or do you just do it from recall?
I actually have a system of organization. A lot of it started in my brain, but at a certain point you can't remember. So then it became if I'm going to New York or if I'm going to San Francisco, I'll put the city name and organize by people I haven't met, and then people who I really love and want to see, and actually arrive in a city, open up the tab and be like, who do I know in San Francisco? And then go. Yeah. And then I would add people to the list who I'd met when I left. Yeah. And now it's taken on a little bit more of an organization. Right. I customized the CRM so that I could really stay up. And my vision is to actually understand and make connections between friends that say what they need. Yeah.
It's incredible, the little small things. And I think it's totally respectable that you have a system. It ensures it's the accountability to follow up. We've all got a gazillion things going in our lives at all times. We all have a million distractions. And it's that follow through, that touch point that kind of closes the loop. Maybe it's following up after a lunch with someone when you're all right, yeah, we'll keep in touch. And then you never do. It's that touch point is like what you said is hey, I valued our conversation. It was important to me. And then with the check-in, that goes such a long way in building trust and reliability. Yeah, go for it.
Another good one. So this is a funny short story. Yeah. I was at Burning Man and I met someone. I was like, wow, this is someone who I wouldn't really ever meet, but we shared this really beautiful experience. And I was like, let's take a picture. So we took a picture, and then I waited a couple weeks and then followed up and said, hey, just to bring you back to the magic, here's the picture. And it's a perfect way for someone to be, boom, instantly transported to that moment and that feeling of when they met you. And who wouldn't respond and say, wow, thanks for that picture and appreciate you just a little bit more.
I mean, so thoughtful. To me, the words that you used were just really magical. It was the bow on top of the present right there. David, the life that you've built for yourself is one that so many people would dream of. You're really a master of lifestyle design. Where does one even begin to start with thinking about designing a lifestyle?
Can I tell you something funny that
Sure.
someone said to me the week right before Burning Man?
What?
Someone calls me and they're like, hey, do you know this guy? I'm like, no, but I've heard his name. They're like, he asked me if you were in the CIA. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, he just didn't understand. And what I think is interesting is, as humans, we have a tendency to put labels on, ways of living we couldn't understand.
Yeah.
My approach to lifestyle design is actually sit down and think about it, plan it out, have a fairly opportune, focused plan, but be completely ready to leave it, drop everything at the wayside, follow your heart and spontaneity.
Hell yeah. So could you use your personal life as an example?
Yes, I could. It's pretty much been that way since I was 15 years old. It started, I was 15. I searched on Google, I want to go to school in France, and found a school called School Year in France. And started to realize that these, of course, thoughts become things. And if it starts here, our actions bring us one step closer. So rather than just experiencing life as a bystander, I like to experience life as a participant. Coming in and saying, okay, 1 year, I wanted to quantify my wealth by how often I do the things I love. And so I took out my phone and I started a tracking process. It was, okay, if I love surfing and I love skiing, and if I'm doing either of those every 3 days in the year, I'm living my best life. And so I started writing down the beaches and the mountains, day number 12, day number 23. And after the first year, I'll never forget, it was in like November. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my God, I did it. I surfed or skied 100 days this year. And then every year since then, I've done that. But I don't have to keep track. It's just how I do it and live my life.
Wow. And knowing that you love to do those activities, it's obviously amazing to do that. Is that like a bulletproof way to ensure your happiness?
Bulletproof way to ensure happiness is remain curious.
Okay.
The moment that you walk by something and don't ask yourself, where does that come from? Who made that? How does that exist? Why did this person buy it? What was going on? Then you don't appreciate the world around you. So the curious leads to the questions lead to everything.
Love it. One thing that I learned, I think, from Chris Hawker when he was on this podcast, it's a very different part of your brain when you're brainstorming versus when you're analytical. Mm-hmm. So that, to me, when you said the what versus the how, those are two different trains of thought there. So I like that, like fleshing out what do I want to do and making a whole list, and then you can figure out the how after you've gotten clear on the what.
The to-do list and the to-be list.
Yeah. Explain that real quick.
Yeah, we were talking about it when I walked in. The to-do list is when our brain starts to think about, oh, I feel accomplished if I do something, and I'm checking it off. The to-be list is an ethos, a way of living in the macro picture of where you want to go. Mm-hmm. And there's usually a lot of things along the way that are going to pull you in different directions. You always have to ask yourself, is this where I want to go? Or is someone else pulling me on their adventure?
Beautifully said, Mr. Denberg. So as we get into kind of the latter part of the discussion here, I love asking my guests 4, 5, 6 colorful questions to show different sides of the guest so we can really understand who you are. We all see your level of detail, your curiosity, your sense of adventure, the way that you kind of live by the beat of your own drum. Absolutely love it. So one thing I'm curious to know is, what are your most consistent rituals?
My most consistent rituals would be morning matcha. Got to supercharge the day. And a little bit of stretching and body movement, because in order to be in the brain, got to be connected to the body. Mm-hmm. So just feeling into it, moving, getting in motion every morning, big one for me. I also have this, call it a ritual, call it a philosophy. I believe that every day has the potential to be the best day of my life. And looking through that lens about how to experience each day, makes it happen faster and easier.
What happens if you wake up on the wrong side of the bed? Do you still think that?
By the way, for the record, there are some days that I can remember where I was really, really sad. I was actually crying, and I was telling myself, "This is the best day of my life." I was like forcing myself to believe it, but I do still, even though it might not seem like it. I do remember those moments where I get down, and those are the moments where you stop trying to do the to-do. You stop trying to be around people and just sit back and recharge, reset, whatever it is. Remember I said, like, do the things that you love. If you like cooking, go cook a meal. If you like playing guitar, go play the guitar. You know what you love and do that, and it'll shift your emotional state.
Looking back to where you're a kid and looking to the man who you are right now, creating just amazing just gatherings and building such beautiful community. I'm curious to know, what was like the biggest thing that you needed to break through? Maybe it was like a bad behavior, or, you know, when you were in your own way. I'm curious to know what that thing was that you needed to really break through to become the man you are today.
Thank you for asking that. That's a really good question, because there was a lot of moments where I think the people around me were concerned that I was not playing the game, and I was being maybe even at times self-destructive. I have a nature of rebel, and I really feel like once I was able to say, hey, the world is my oyster, but when we're in your classroom, this is your oyster, and that's cool. That's fine. So it's developing respect for people's space allowed me to be more welcome and to be able to play.
Gotcha. I had to ask that question because I've only known you for a couple of years. I was curious to know kind of like what you were like as a kid. Were you just like really wild?
I have more energy than most people now, and even then I had more energy than anyone. My teacher in 4th grade came and met with my mom, and she's like, I have to tell you, you know, your son is the most difficult and challenging son in the entire class, without a question. There's David and there's everyone else. But if we were crossing the Oregon Trail and there's one person who is going to be leading our wagon caravan, I would choose David. And that's where my mom was like, oh, so he's a leader. He's just got his own way of doing it.
Yeah. Your sister also told me to ask you about food. So I don't even know where to start on this. Maybe it's like, you know, the best meal that you can recall, or...
Food is curiosity.
Okay.
It's food is also pleasure. Food is culture. And when I say food is curiosity, it's like when you eat something, you can just eat it, or you can ask yourself, what's in it? You can ask yourself, who made it? How do I make it? I want to learn. And so food has always been one of those things for me. And she also knows that I get very frustrated and upset when I'm like stuck in a meal eating terrible food with bad company, when there's good company and great food over there, to the point sometimes I'll just get up and be like, this is my life and I'm not going to be here anymore for this, but have a great dinner.
And then the last question of this part of the interview, I wanted to ask you a question. So you're a community man, clearly. If you had to pick like one moment where you felt most like loved and included and supported, what would it be?
You were there. The moment where I truly was in my heart feeling so much power and acknowledgement and support and love and gratitude was on my 30th birthday. So, short backstory, 30th birthday was about a year and a month ago at Powder Mountain, which is the ski resort that Summit owns. It's 10,000 acres of property, and we did a 120-person camp out for 3 days and 3 nights. And, you know, there's a lot of little fun woven in, but on the last night, they actually turned the whole party into a roast and a gratitude session. And there was a little, I'd say like a podium, and each of my friends who felt compelled to tell a story that made me laugh at my own ridiculousness or feel the love of their knowing how much, you know, I've played a role in their life. And that moment, it was actually my mom who said something that made me always kind of, now I can't forget it. You know, when when your family says something like, yeah, I wish you hadn't said that.
I forget what she said. What'd she say?
She said, within 10 hours of David being born, he was looking at me with these eyes, and I said to myself, this boy who's a day old knows himself already better than most adults I've ever met. And she said that to me. I was like, thanks, Mom, for instilling so much confidence and love. You're the best.
That birthday party was extraordinary. It was so much fun. For 120 people to go to Utah for a weekend for a birthday party is an incredible turnout, and it just really shows how much you give, how much you mean to the people in your life, and just what a beautiful reflection. So I wanted to just acknowledge you for that. I love you, brother. It was an honor to be there.
Thank you.
So, David, as we kind of migrate here to the end of the show, a few final questions. What can we do to support you?
Mark, thanks for asking. This is, when we step out on to a new adventure, it's time to call in the support of community. This project in Tokyo that I'm so passionate about, blockchain, I want to meet people who want to talk about how technology can change the world. So if you would like to attend any of the events because they call to you in terms of the geography or the interest, reach out.
Cool. And how can they reach out?
Yeah, my best email is david@open-circles.co.
One of my favorite questions to ask at the end of the interviews, we've all got the external conversation that we're having, we're communicating externally, but we also have the internal dialogue that's happening internally that's also real. So I'm curious, this show is called Are You Being Real? What's been your internal private conversation the last hour?
Oh, more like the last few days, weeks. The internal dialogue is that the joy of life for me is the highs and the lows because it makes them more pronounced. I felt more pressure, more challenge, and at times even more uncertainty than ever in my life, right alongside the strength and the excitement and the vision. And it's that balance. It's okay to be down.
Mm-hmm. How do you deal with the down when you're in it? You just remind yourself that it's part of the journey?
That is the real question. Do something you love and spend time with people you love, primarily laughing. If you're laughing, eventually you're just going to forget that you were upset about anything.
Nothing's really that big of a deal most of the time. And then the last question, what final words of wisdom, advice do you want to leave with the listeners today? Maybe it's something on your walk over that you wanted to say that you haven't had a chance to share yet. Could really be anything.
I always appreciate people who are honest and caring. Surround yourself with people who are honest and caring so that you don't have to worry about yourself. They help take care of you.
The one and only David Denberg. David, thank you for your beauty, your magnificence, your brilliance. I love you.
Thanks, brother.